Thomas, Percy, and Toby have been working on their branch line for a very long time. Thomas pulls his two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle. Percy pulls the mail train, and Toby pulls trucks and his carriage, Henrietta. He cares dearly for his Henrietta and doesn't want anything to happen to her. One evening, Sir Topham Hatt came to the sheds.
"I know you three are all very tired and need a good night's rest, but Thomas, I need you to take a late-night passenger train."
Thomas was surprised. "But sir, I've been working hard all day, and—" "Don't worry," said Ramos. "Percy will be out taking the mail train, so he won't be alone. And besides, it shouldn't take too long." "All right," said Thomas. "I'll do it, sir." "Thank you," said Sir Topham Hatt, and with that he left. "Good night, Toby." "Good night, Ramos," said Thomas. "I'll be back in a couple of hours." And Thomas set off to find Annie and Clarabelle. Around midnight, Thomas returned to the sheds. He enjoyed his night out with Percy, but he was now exhausted. He rolled into the sheds, and he was just about to fall asleep when he remembered something. "Oh, no," he whispered. "I have to take the 7 o'clock train in the morning. I hope I can get enough rest." Unfortunately, he didn't. Thomas was still tired, and his firebots couldn't get started. The passengers were beginning to arrive, but the coaches weren't ready. At last, Thomas's fire was burning, and still tired, he puffed to collect his coaches. Now, Toby has a 7:30 train right after Thomas, so to save time, they keep Henrietta in the same siding as Annie and Clarabelle. But Thomas was too tired to pay attention, and he accidentally got Henrietta coupled to Clarabelle. When Thomas started to leave, he felt a bit more weight, but he thought he was just still tired and didn't have the same strength like normal. So Thomas headed to the station with 2 coaches and a carriage. Toby eventually woke up and left the sheds to find Henrietta. But when he arrived, Henrietta was gone. "Oh no!" Toby cried. "Where did she go?" Toby looked all over the shunting yards, but he couldn't find her. Maybe she's at the station," he said. So Toby puffed as fast as he could to the station. Thomas was at the station letting passengers into the coaches. The passengers were happy to have more room in the coaches, but the coaches were very confused of how Henrietta was with Annie and Clarabelle. But then the conductor blew his whistle, and Thomas set off, just as Toby rounded the corner and saw Henrietta roll into the distance. "Bother," said Toby. "Now I'll never get her back." Toby was very worried. He didn't know what to do. His train was supposed to leave in 15 minutes. But then he had an idea. "Station master, call the nearest signalman and tell them to hold up Thomas." "All right," said the station master. "Now go get your missing carriage." And Toby huffed and chuffed as fast as he could. As the station master called the signalman, Toby was whizzing down the track as fast as he could. "I must catch up to Thomas. I must." Thomas was stopped at the signal just before the next station. "Peep, peep! What's the hold-up?" complained Thomas. "We've been waiting here for 5 minutes now." Just then, he heard the sound of a bell. There was Toby coming up the track. "There you are, Henrietta! I was so worried about you." Henrietta was happy to see Toby, too. Thomas felt embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Toby," he said. "I didn't realize I took your carriage." "Well, that's all right," said Toby. "Come on, Toby," said his driver. "We have a train to take." So Toby coupled that to his carriage, and he trundled back to the station.
It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodor, and all the engines were working hard. Everyone except for Thomas. He had broken down, and he needed help. But soon, Percy arrived and he helped to get Thomas to the steamworks. On their way to the works, Thomas told Percy of his tales of going to the wooden railway dimension. It was so simplistic, yet so different, he said. A world where you cannot pull trucks without a magnet. Trucks that forked into different directions. There was even a wooden version of me. And the whole place smelled of trees. Ooh, gasped Percy. It's fun to listen to this story, Thomas. I'm sure it must have been a magical experience. It really was, said Thomas. But it felt rather short and unreal in a way. Almost like a dream. Just then, a signal switched to red. Percy applied his brakes, but Thomas was not coupled, and he flew down an old track. Oh no! Cried Percy. He started after him, but the points weren't straight, and he went the wrong way. Meanwhile, Thomas was passing through some bushes, until he saw a tunnel up ahead. Thomas knew he shouldn't go into the tunnel, but he turned and stopped, and he ended up entering the tunnel anyway. When Thomas opened his eyes, he saw a much larger, blockier version of himself right in front of him. "Hello," said the late Duplo Thomas. "I'm Thomas." "But I'm Thomas," said Thomas. He was very confused. But he also felt that he had déjà vu. "I know I'm going to sound stupid for saying this, but what's going on? Why am I here? Why are you right in front of me?" "Well," said the late Duplo Thomas, "I was looking for Percy, who had broken down, but I was sent on this sighting, and I found myself at this tunnel." "Well, at least that's different from what I did," said Plarail Thomas. "I was the one who broken down, and Percy had to come get me, but I went through this tunnel and ended up here." "I bet you want to explore," said Lado Duplo Thomas, "but you don't really fit on the tracks." He was right. Plarail Thomas was stuck in the center of the rails. "Don't worry," he said. "I think I have something in the back of the yard that might help," and he puffed away. He returned a few moments later. "This piece of machinery will allow you to move on our rails under your own power." "Thank you," said Thomas. So he was put on the machine, and the two set off. Thomas was enjoying himself in the Lado Duplo world. He could actually pull trucks this time and put them into sightings without them forking and messing up. After a while, he did start to notice some minor issues. He noticed he wasn't seeing as many new things. In his world, many new friends would join regularly and had more to do. The Lado Duplo world seemed a bit too big. It was cool to look at, but not as easy to fit in. But he was still having a good time, and he wanted it to last forever. But then, Lado Duplo Thomas bumped into Plarail Thomas. "Oh no!" cried Plarail Thomas. "I'm heading straight for the tunnel!" Thomas soon found himself back in his own dimension. Percy had just passed through the trees. "There you are, Thomas. Now, let's get you back on our way." Thomas had enjoyed his time in the Lado Duplo world, but no matter what, he thought, he will always miss home. Skiff, the railboat, is a sailboat who moves along the rails with the wind. He is good friends with Thomas, Ryan, and the Great Western engines. Skiff enjoys going down the tracks and saying hello to everybody. One day, Diesel 10 was going along the side of the tracks. There had been a big storm and he had to pick up fallen branches and debris. "I'm working on the railway all the livelong day." "Hello, Diesel 10, called Skiff. "You don't seem to be in a good mood." "Bah," growled Diesel 10. "All I get to do today is pick up branches. Why can't I have an exciting job? Now get out before Pinchy gets you." "Oh my, sorry to bother you and Pinchy." And he sailed away. Ugh, about time. Then he went back to work. The next day, it was very windy. Trees had fallen all over the tracks, so that meant Diesel 10 had to get back to work. He picked up a bunch of branches laying along the main line so that the express could get through. Then, they went to Gordon's Hill to pick up fallen branches. The wind howled fiercely. Pinchy rattled in the wind. "I know, Pinchy, you don't like it," grumbled Diesel 10. "But we must clear the line." The wind was making work very difficult indeed. At the bottom of the hill, Skiff was moving rather fast. The wind blew the back of his sail. He raced up Gordon's Hill. "Whoa," he cried, "I need to slow down." But he couldn't. Skiff was powered directly by wind. And just then... "Ow!" cried Diesel 10. "What are you doing, Skiff?" "Sorry, Diesel 10. The wind is too strong up here." "Then why did you go sailing?" Suddenly, it happened. At one moment, they were at the top. The next, Diesel 10 and Skiff were racing down the hill. "Ah!" wailed Diesel 10. "Stop, Skiff!" "I can't. The wind's too strong, and you're too heavy." Diesel 10 tried to apply his brakes, but his brakes jammed from the speed, and he kept going faster and faster. Diesel 10 looked along the track, and there was Gordon rushing through with the express. "Oh!" cried Gordon. "Get out of my way!" Luckily, the points were changed just in time. The two thought they were in the clear, but they were wrong. Up ahead was James taking on water. "Oh my goodness! Help! Save us!" The single man did, just in time. "What was that?" exclaimed James. Diesel 10 and Skiff were starting to get close to the docks. Any minute there could be an accident. "I want to stop! I want to stop!" cried Diesel 10. But then he got an idea. "Skiff, throw out your anchor. That'll slow us down." And it did. But a bit too well. Skiff came to a stop immediately and... Meanwhile, Diesel 10 was still moving relatively fast, but the dock was telephoned ahead in time. Diesel 10 was sent onto a siding. He was too bewildered to care about what happened. "I want to stop! I want to stop!" "I have stopped," said Diesel 10 gratefully. "I said exactly that several years ago," said Percy. "Looks like you went for a sail there, Diesel 10, laughed Thomas. "Did you enjoy it at least?" asked Percy. "It was fun and exciting," decided Diesel 10. "But I think I'll take a bit of a break before I decide to go sailing again."
Percy and Henry are two green engines that work on Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Percy is small and likes to take mail, and Henry is big and likes to take cargo. But both have been very timid and nervous regularly. They aren't always like this, but it seems very strange for them to be this way. So, how did they come to this state? Let's find out. One night, Henry was due to take the flying kipper. The workmen at the harbor were loading fish into the vans, but there was a large catch this year, and they needed to add more vans to the train. But soon everything was ready. The conductor's whistle blew, and Henry set off. Through the night, Henry huffed and chuffed down the line. Henry is a strong engine and can take heavy trains, but he would need a back engine when he got to Gordon's Hill to help with the heavier load. So, when Henry arrived at the station before the hill, he whistled a special signal. "Peep, peep, I need help." "Peep, peep," whistled Percy, "I won't be long," and he buffered up to the van. "I'm ready," he said, and the two engines puffed onwards to Gordon's Hill.
The hill was soon in lamplight view. Henry started to ascend the steep hill with the kipper. Percy was not as strong as the other tank engines, but he did his best to help. The two engines huffed and chuffed in union to reach the top of the hill. But Henry noticed that they were starting to slow down. Percy's strength was giving out. "Come on, Percy," said his driver. "We're almost there." Now Henry felt that he was carrying 70% of the train. "Give it your all, Percy," he wheezed. Suddenly, Percy entered turbo mode, and he started to push faster. Henry was now at the top. "We did it," he cried. "Now we can..." But before he could say anything else, everything else happened at once. Crack! Henry's brakes snapped, and he went racing down the hill with the flying kipper. Meanwhile, Percy was still in turbo mode, and when all the weight left in front of him, he went flying off the tracks. Henry, on the other hand, was going much too fast down Gordon's Hill, and there was no way for him to stop. A signalman diverted him into a sign, but he crashed through the buffers and into a tree. Both sets of driver and firemen were able to jump clear, but the two engines were in terrible condition, bashed, bruised, broken, and traumatized. Two separate rescue teams went out to clear the wrecks. Both were a huge hassle, and the two victims of the accident didn't say anything. But Henry and Percy were soon sent to the works to be mended. The two were quiet at the steamworks, even when Victor tried to start a conversation. Henry and Percy were traumatized by their experience. They had both experienced insane accidents and events, but none were compared to such a crash that they had just gone through. Ever since the two engines had been fixed, they had been very timid. Henry can still be himself most of the time, but he is more timid to even the littlest of things. Percy is definitely more scared than he used to be, but he's perfectly fine with his friends, Thomas, Toby, and Ramus. While I'm sure this is going to affect some things, I hope you understand why these green wrecks feel this way.
One morning, Ramus was on his way to the Farquhar quarry. It was going to be his first day up there, and he was excited. "I've always wanted to work with trucks in a rocky area," he said, "and I heard there's going to be a drill engine working there." And he hurried along the line. Ramus soon arrived at the quarry. There were lots of rock walls and a big tunnel which led to the other part of the quarry where the trucks could be stored and loaded. A black diesel with side plates and cow catchers came up to him. "Hello," said the diesel. "Welcome to the Farquhar quarry. You must be Ramus. I'm Mavis." "So you're Mavis," said Ramus. "Toby told me a bit about you, though he didn't mention you were a diesel. You have a problem with that?" "Oh, no," said Ramus. "I should be happy that I have someone else to work with." And the two set to work. Mavis and Ramus worked wonders with each other, pushing and pulling trucks into place and loading them up with stone and coal. Then Toby or Percy would come to collect the full trucks and return the ones that were empty. After the sun began to set, Ramus was preparing to go back to the Farquhar shed. "You know," said Mavis, "you can sleep with me in the quarry sheds if you want." "All right then," said Ramus. "Thank you." And the two headed for the shed. At the sheds, they told each other stories. Ramus told about how he used to be another Plarail Thomas, and Mavis told about how she saved Toby from a roaring torrent. "He was balancing on the rails like an acrobat on a tightrope. I saved him just before he fell. After that, I was allowed to take some trucks up to the station and see Toby every once in a while." "That's nice," said Ramus. "I would like to see Thomas every once in a while, too." "Yeah, but I reckon you would need to do something heroic first." "Anyway," said Ramus, "let's try to get some sleep."
And that they did. The next day, Ramos was shunting trucks into a siding when... "Get out of the mines! There's been a gas leak!" The workmen raced out of the mines. "Wait!" shouted one of them. "Tyler's still in there." But no one wanted to go back in. "I'll do it," shouted Ramos. "I can't be affected by toxic gas." "All right then, hurry!" And Ramos raced into the mines. Ramos looked around in the tunnel. He needed to find Tyler before it was too late. But then he heard coughing by the tracks. And there was Tyler, running towards Ramos. "Get in the cab!" cried Ramos, and he raced out of the tunnel with Tyler the workman. When Ramos got out of the tunnel, the medical team took Tyler to get checked out, and the rest of the workmen watching the scene thanked Ramos for his heroism. Afterwards, Sir Topham Hatt came to inspect the situation.
"The mine has been cleared of the gas," he said, "and while Tyler had damage to his lungs, he should be able to return in a few weeks. Ramos, you were very brave today. As a reward, you will be allowed to take a line of coal trucks to Farquhar for Thomas to take."
"Oh, thank you, sir," said Ramos. "It'll be great seeing Thomas more often." "Of course, you still have lots of work to do here," said Mavis. "I know," said Ramos. "I'll still sleep here too if you'd like." "I would," said Mavis.
"Excellent,"
said Sir Topham Hatt. And with that he left, knowing that Ramos was going to continue to be a really useful engine.
Scruffy is a ballast truck that is used in the yards. He was considered the leader of the trucks until he was pulled apart by Oliver. Because of that, Scruffy is no longer the truck that he used to be, and his tail heeds as a warning to any trucks who try to mess with Oliver. One afternoon, Brian came into the yards with a load of trucks. He was very tired, probably because the truck behind him was Fred Pelhay. He was one of Scruffy's goonies before he was pulled apart, and it was Fred's goal to become the new Scruffy. Brian set the line of trucks next to Scruffy and left.
"Heh, I sure gave him a run for his money,"
said Fred Pelhay. "I'm sure you did," said Scruffy.
"I'm just trying to bring power to the trucks again," said Fred. "Just like the good old days of Tease and Oliver."
"But guess who got pulled apart because of it?" said Scruffy. "Take it from me, Pelhay. You do not want to take it too far with steam engines."
"Heh, Ryan's a wuss. Never can say no and just takes our teasing.
With that attitude, I wouldn't be surprised if you were pulled apart tomorrow." "Pah, what rubbish." And with that, they stopped talking. For the next couple of days, Fred continued to bully Ryan and cause problems for his trains. It was starting to get out of hand, but Ryan didn't know what to do. He didn't want to cause trouble just because the truck was being silly. However, he didn't want to be harassed by this truck every day for the rest of his life. So Ryan settled with doing nothing, until one day where he reached his limit. He was in the yard going to get Fred Pelhay for his train.
"Stop right there, Ryan."
"Why? Is something wrong?"
"Oh, something is wrong, all right."
"What?"
"What's wrong is that I have to be part of a train with a stupid purple dope."
Ryan was very cross, crosser than he ever was before.
"Stupid purple dope? Well then take this, you orange butt-tooth food trough."
"Ow!" cried Fred. All of the trucks were laughing at Fred Pelhay's shortcomings. But Ryan suddenly realized what he had done. What will Sir Topham Hatt say? He soon found out.
"Well, Ryan,
You don't know your own strength, do you?
No, sir, said Ryan nervously. But to be frank, that truck was being a jerk.
I see. Sir Topham Hatt turned to Fred Pelhay. My engines don't take kindly to bullies. Considering you saw Scruffy pulled apart, I'd think you know better.
Fred said nothing. He just groaned. Fred Pelhay was sent to the works and returned the next day.
I did warn you, said Scruffy. I know, grunted Fred. Oh well, we live and learn, said Scruffy. And sometimes the best way to learn is to live through something.
Fred Pelhay could only agree.
Edward is one of the oldest and wisest engines on the island of Sodor. He does all his work with no fuss and is helpful to any engine who needs it. One day, Edward was preparing a passenger train when James arrived with his train. Peep, peep, he whistled with vanity. While you're preparing trains, please go fetch my truck. I'm preparing my train, replied Edward. Besides, why don't you do it yourself? Are you afraid to get dirty? Pah! Scoffed James. An important engine like me shouldn't have to go into sidings. Well, you're going to have to anyway, sighed Edward. If I fetch your trucks, then you need to put away your coaches. And with that, he left the platform. James scowled and shunted his coaches into a siding. After James returned to the platform, Edward was still collecting his train. Hurry up, Mr. Slowcoach, he said. I have work to do. Edward was very annoyed. But then he got an idea. Well, if I'm Mr. Slowcoach, then it shouldn't be a challenge to beat me in a race. Of course not, snapped James. Then why don't you prove it? Get your train to the docks first and prove to the whole island that you can beat the old iron. Oh, I will, said James. He didn't realize that he wasn't coupled to his train yet, but Edward was ready to start, and James was just too cocky. All right then, he said. Ready, set, go! And like lightning, James raced out of the station, while Edward waited for the conductor's whistle to blow, and then started off. James soared down Edward's branch line. People waved to him as he passed, including a signalman. I really am a splendid engine, he thought. It's nice for people to wave. He whistled and whooshed down the line as Edward puffed steadily behind him. James continued to puff down the line, and the docks were soon coming into view. He reached the docks and made his grand entrance. Here's James! Presently, Salty started talking. Ahoy there, James, he said. What are you doing here? I'm delivering some trucks, James replied. Can't you see? Then where be your trucks, me hearty? Oh, you have got to be kidding me. That's right, said Edward, entering the docks. And I said I was the first to deliver their train to the harbor. Since you haven't, that means I won the race. Salty laughed. James's face went as red as his boiler, and it was hard to tell if it was from anger or embarrassment. But that night, Sir Topham Hatt scolded James. You have caused confusion and delay by leaving your train behind, James. James looked at his buffers. And Edward, it was very out of character you to challenge James to a race. I'm sorry, sir. As punishments, he went on,
You two will be left here tomorrow to think about your actions. The next morning, James spoke first. Look, Edward, I'm sorry, No, I am, interrupted Edward. I shouldn't have egged you on into doing that race. Well, said James, I still want to say I am sorry for being rude. I was feeling particularly moody and I guess I couldn't control myself. Well, as long as we're both sorry, said Edward, then everyone comes out happy. James agreed unconditionally. Nia is an orange engine who came from Kenya in Africa. She was no longer needed on her railway, and Sir Topham Hatt was quick to buy her. Nia is very friendly, and got along with the other engines splendidly. One day, Nia was collecting some cows to deliver to market. This was her first time pulling livestock, and she was fascinated by the cows. "You're good to go," said the farmer. "But please remember to be careful not to bump these cattle trucks too hard while the cows are still in them." "Okay, thank you," said Nia, and with that she puffed carefully away. Nia was doing fine taking the cattle. When she got to the top of Gordon's Hill, she was careful not to let the truck bump into her. Nia puffed slowly down the hill and headed to her final stop, Edward's station. She puffed into the station, happy that nothing went wrong. And that's exactly where it went wrong. Nia stopped too fast and the truck bumped into her. "Oh no!" she cried. The conductor and driver took a look at the cows. The driver returned. "A couple broken legs, but nothing too major." But Nia thought it was major. "I messed up on my first train. Right at the very end, too. The farmer might not let me take his cows again." Edward could see that Nia was sad. "Pulling cattle isn't easy," he sympathized. "I once pulled the train of empty cattle trucks, and a couple of stray cows caused me to lose a third of my train." Nia laughed, but she knew it still wasn't going to undo what happened. Meanwhile, Henry was taking a heavy goods train while Diesel acted as banker. They were almost to the top when... pop! Smoke billowed from Diesel's engine and Henry had to stop. "What happened?" he called. "My engine blew up," wheezed Diesel. "Oh, that's just great." But then it happened. The weight of the trucks caused Henry's coupling to snap, and Diesel with the truck started racing down the hill. "Help!" cried Diesel. His engine was blown up, though Diesel's brakes still worked. He tried to brake, but his strength wasn't going to be enough. Back at Wellsworth, Edward and Nia heard Diesel's cries, and Nia was quick to act. She switched onto the runaway line, and as soon as Diesel came around the bend, she puffed forward to catch the train. When the train hit her, Nia began to brake. The train started to slow down. It went slower and slower until finally, Nia and Diesel were able to stop the train. "Whew. Thank you, Nia," sighed Diesel. "Never thought I'd be saying that today." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It doesn't matter right now. What matters is getting my engine fixed as soon as possible." So Edward took Diesel to the works, and Nia became the new acting banker for Henry's train. Even though Nia had messed up her first cattle train, she quickly made up for it by saving Diesel. Nia had definitely proven herself a valuable asset for Sir Topham Hatt's railway.
A new part of the line was being built on the Pilgardred branch. It was going to run through the mountains around Coldy Fell. It was a rather large project indeed, and there was even a big bridge that had to be built. But at last, the new part of the line was complete. Sir Topham Hatt came to the sheds later that evening. "Tomorrow will be the opening of the new station on the Pilgardred branch line," he said. "Gordon, Henry, Thomas, you three are going to pull the first passenger trains up to that station." Gordon and Thomas were very excited. It was going to be such an honor to pull the first trains. But Henry was feeling rather nervous. "Will climbing the mountains and crossing the big bridge be safe?" "It can be very high and windy up there," said Toby. But Sir Topham Hatt wouldn't have opened the line if he didn't think it was safe. Henry wasn't entirely convinced. "If anything goes wrong," said Thomas, "you'll at least have me and Gordon to keep you safe." That made Henry feel a little better. And with that, the engines went to sleep. It was the next day. The three engines were lined up at Kildane. Gordon leading in front, Henry followed behind, and Thomas would be in the back. The engines waited and waited for the conductor's whistle to blow. When it finally happened, they started up the Pilgardred branch line. Gordon, Henry, and Thomas puffed in unison down the line. They puffed through stations and were soon on the new part of the line. The line moved upwards along the mountains and curved around trees and rocks. The three moved higher and higher. The fog started to roll in. It was getting harder to see. Henry was getting nervous again, and he started to fall behind. Thomas did his best, but he couldn't get Henry to catch up to Gordon. If only they could get out of the fog and to the big bridge. At last, the fog cleared, and there it was, the big bridge. And across it, the new station. But instead of crossing, Henry stopped just before it. Thomas puffed alongside. "Aren't you going to cross, Henry?" he asked. "You go first, Thomas," he said nervously. "A little scared, are we?" said Thomas. "All right, I'll let you know if it's safe to cross." And Thomas puffed onto the big bridge. The wind howled around Thomas. It was stronger than he thought. Suddenly, his front wheels started to lift up. "Oh no!" cried Thomas. The wind picked Thomas up and jammed him into the metal bars. Thomas was stuck on the bridge. Henry had seen everything. Now he knew for sure that he wasn't going to cross the bridge. "Henry, you need to cross the bridge." "What?" cried Henry. "I can't cross it. I'll get blown off like you were." "Look, the people at the next station need to know that I'm in trouble. Besides, you're heavier than me, so you probably won't get blown off." Henry knew that he had to help his friend. So, he mustered up all his courage, and he puffed onto the bridge. The wind whistled around his boiler, but Henry pressed on. He soon passed Clarabelle, Annie, and then Thomas. And finally, Henry made it to the other side of the bridge. "Whew! I did it," sighed Henry. Henry puffed as fast as he could to the news station. And when he arrived, the news station's master was quick to sound the alarm. In no time flat, Harold the helicopter was in the sky. He had been careful not to get caught in the wind, but with enough hard work and determination, Harold put Thomas back on the tracks. "Thank you, Harold," called Thomas. "Good to be of service," replied Harold, and he buzzed away. Soon, Thomas was at the other side of the bridge, and he arrived smoothly into the news station. "Thank you, Henry," said Thomas. "If you didn't brave the big bridge, I don't know where I would be." "I had to help a friend," said Henry, "even if I was a little scared." At last, the new station was officially open. The passengers cheered, and everyone was proud. But not just because of the new station, but because of the brave efforts of Harold, Henry, and Thomas.
It was a very snowy December on the island of Sodor. The engines worked hard, but the snow just kept falling and falling. Many trains had to be cancelled, which was a problem because the Christmas season was coming soon, and many people would come to visit their families. It was soon Christmas Eve. The snow hadn't stopped falling, but the engines knew that today they had to get their jobs done. The letters and parcels needed to be delivered, and the passengers needed to be home for Christmas. A snowstorm was going to be heading their way soon, so the engines needed to work extra hard. But soon, all the engines had returned to Timoth's sheds, except for one. "Where's Gordon?" asked Percy. "I think he had to take a train to Vicarstown," replied Thomas. "He should be back in a couple of hours," said James. "As long as the snowstorm allows him," said Toby gravely. Gordon was at Vicarstown station, letting the final passengers in. It was very cold indeed. The wind picked up snow and it swirled around Gordon's buffers. He shivered. "Come on," he said impatiently. "Let's get started." "I'm afraid that won't happen," said the conductor. Gordon jumped. "What? Why?" he asked. "I got word from control. It's too cold and windy. It'll be too dangerous to go out in a blizzard. We have to cancel this train." "But it's the last train before Christmas," said Gordon. "This is our passengers' last chance to be home. We need to get this train to Knapford." "And how exactly do you plan on doing it?" "Fit me with a snowplow and fill me up with coal. We need to get to Knapford," said Gordon. "It's Christmas, for goodness sake." "That's the spirit," cheered Gordon's driver. "The Christmas spirit, if you will." Get it? Because Christmas and... forget it. Let's just get this train going. So Gordon got a snowplow, the driver and fireman got warmer clothes, the conductor blew his whistle, and the train set out for home. Gordon puffed through the bitter cold. He raced through Henry's Tunnel and rocketed through Crovan's Gate. The wind and snow bit at his face, but Gordon didn't care. He just wanted to get to Knapford as fast as his wheels would let him. The snow on the track didn't make the journey easier. With Gordon's speed, he could push through most drifts, but some required more work to get through. But it never stopped him, and Gordon soon arrived at his hill. He started to climb, and the frosty wind hit his face directly. The rails weren't icy, but it was difficult. At long last, Gordon reached the top. He sped down the hill, but his problems weren't through yet. Several snowdrifts were piling up and becoming wet. This would make it harder to break through some. Eventually came a snowdrift that was larger and wetter than the rest. Gordon tried to push through, but as he tried, the snow kept falling, making it harder and harder. Gordon got colder and colder. His boiler and fire were no longer keeping him warm. He was too cold to even let out a whistle. Thomas had been called to Knapford to take Gordon's coaches away. Sir Topham Hatt had heard of Gordon's plan, and stood with his shivering wife on the platform. The two waited and waited, but there was no sign of Gordon. "Topham, I'm getting cold." "So am I, my dear. But I am not leaving until my engine is home and safe." Even Thomas began to worry. "What's that?" he cried suddenly. There was the light of a lamp in a distance. It was Gordon. He was covered with snow and his face was as blue as his paint. But Gordon had made it to Knapford. You made it! Cried Thomas excitedly. Just in time for Christmas, shivered Gordon. Well done, Gordon, said Sir Topham Hatt. You didn't have to do it, but you did. And you made sure these lovely people would be home in time for Christmas. Gordon felt very proud. After the coaches had been shunted, Thomas and Gordon returned to the sheds. When they arrived, Gordon received a hero's welcome. I have ice chunks in my boiler, groaned Gordon. Oh, it'll thaw out eventually, said Toby. Everyone laughed. Gordon was finally home for Christmas, and the sheds were warmer because of it.